They thought he was just another old man who didn't know what he was doing. As James Wheeler limped into the courtroom, the young lawyers couldn't hide their smirks. His worn suit had seen better days, and his hands shook slightly as he placed his old briefcase on the table. The 72-year-old veteran stood alone, representing himself against one of Boston's top law firms. The opposing lawyers exchanged knowing glances. This would be an easy win. What they didn't know was that James had spent 20 years as a JAG Corps officer, handling some of the military's most complex cases. Now, watching their condescending smiles, he felt a familiar calm settle over him, the same calm he'd felt before every major battle, every crucial mission. What happens when these arrogant lawyers discover they've just walked into a legal ambush by a master strategist? Dawn breaks over a modest colonial home in Quincy, its white paint weathered but pristine. Inside, James Wheeler stands before his bedroom mirror, methodically knotting his tie. His movements are precise, the same precision that once field-stripped. An M16 in pitch darkness. The Medal of Honor catches morning light from its display case. James pauses, remembering the day President Nixon pinned it on his chest. For conspicuous gallantry, they'd said. Now, 48 years later, he needs that courage again. "You'd know exactly what to say, wouldn't you, Margaret?" he murmurs, touching the photo of his late wife on the dresser. Her smile, frozen in time 5 years ago, still lights up the room. She'd been the one who encouraged him to go to law school after Vietnam, to channel his strategic mind into defending others. He opens his closet, pushing aside Margaret's untouched clothes to reach the back. There, in a cedar box, rests his JAG Corps badge, polished despite decades of disuse. Next to it, a stack of case files, hundreds of military trials, each one a battle fought with words instead of weapons. The foreclosure notice sits on his kitchen table, its threat wrapped in legal jargon. Third notice, final warning. The bank's mistake had doubled his mortgage payments overnight, and their customer service had been a maze of dead ends. 6 months of trying to reason with them, of explaining the error, had led nowhere. James makes his coffee strong, military style. The morning news drones about banking scandals, corporate fraud, executives walking free. His hands shake slightly as he reaches for his mug, old war wounds acting up again. "Steady now, soldier," he whispers, a mantra from his courtroom days. The tremors subside. In his study, law books line the walls, gifts from Margaret, collected over their 40-year marriage. She'd been his legal assistant, his partner in every sense. "The law protects everyone equally," she always said, "but sometimes it needs a little help finding its way." The morning sun illuminates his briefcase, Margaret's last anniversary gift. Inside, he's prepared his defense with the same attention to detail that once planned combat missions. Property laws, banking regulations, precedent cases, all arranged with tactical precision. His phone buzzes. A text from Tommy, his grandson. "Good luck today, Grandpa. Show them what Wheelers are made of." James smiles, remembering Tommy's law school graduation last year. "Why aren't you taking my case?" he'd asked the boy. "Because you need to do this yourself, Grandpa. Some battles choose their warriors." A final check in the mirror. His suit is older, but pressed to military standards. His shoes, though worn, shine with parade ground perfection. The reflection shows an old warrior, but his eyes still burn with the same intensity that once commanded courtrooms and combat zones. "One last mission," he tells his reflection. "Time to show these corporate lawyers that they've underestimated the wrong veteran." He picks up the briefcase, its weight familiar and reassuring. Inside, decades of legal expertise wait to be unleashed. As he steps onto his porch, the morning sun feels like a spotlight, illuminating the path to one final battle. His neighbor, Mrs. Chen, waves from her garden. "Good luck, James. We're all praying for you." News of his fight has spread through the neighborhood. These streets, these homes, they're all facing the same battle against corporate giants who see them as numbers on a spreadsheet. James straightens his spine, ignoring the old wounds that make every step a challenge. In Vietnam, he'd learned, that the size of the enemy doesn't matter. What matters is the strength of your position and the justice of your cause. The taxi arrives. He'd sold his car months ago to keep up with the corrupt mortgage payments. As he settles into the back seat, his hand brushes the Medal of Honor in his pocket. He'd brought it for courage, just as he'd carried it into every courtroom during his JAG Corps days. Federal courthouse, he tells the driver, his voice steady. The same destination, the same mission. Justice. Only the enemy has changed. The mahogany doors of courtroom 3 feel heavier than James remembers. Inside, the bank's legal team clusters around their table. 3 lawyers from Preston and Hayes, Boston's most expensive corporate firm. Their suits cost more than his monthly pension. Lead counsel Richard Preston III, 35, barely glances up from his smartphone. His associates, Melissa Chen, 28, and Brad Thompson, 31, whisper and smirk as James makes his way to the plaintiff's table. The limp seems more pronounced under the fluorescent lights. "Mr. Wheeler," Preston calls out, his voice dripping with false concern. "Are you sure you wouldn't like to reconsider our settlement offer? It's quite generous, considering—" James sets his briefcase down carefully. "Considering what, counselor? My age? My limp? Or perhaps you're referring to the fact that I'm representing myself?" The young lawyer's smile falters slightly. Something in James's tone, the calm confidence, the precise diction, doesn't match the doddering veteran they'd expected. Judge Sandra Martinez, 60s, enters, and the bailiff calls the court to order. She reviews the docket, eyes lingering on James's pro se status. "Mr. Wheeler, the court must advise you that representing yourself in a federal foreclosure case is highly unusual. Do you understand the complexities involved?" James rises slowly, deliberately. "Your Honor, I spent 20 years as a judge advocate, General Corps officer, handling cases far more complex than a simple foreclosure defense. I believe I'm qualified to present my case." The shift in the courtroom is subtle but palpable. Preston's smartphone disappears. Melissa Chen stops whispering. Judge Martinez leans forward, interest sparked. "Very well," she says. "Mr. Preston, you may present your motion to dismiss." Preston rises, straightening his tie. "Your Honor, this case is a waste of the court's valuable time. Mr. Wheeler's complaint fails to state a claim upon which relief can be granted. The key: bank's foreclosure proceedings are entirely proper under Massachusetts law. We move for immediate dismissal under Federal Rule of Civil Procedure 12b-6. James doesn't rise immediately. He lets the silence stretch, just as he used to do before cross-examination. When he finally stands, his voice fills the courtroom with quiet authority. "Your Honor, counsel's motion is premature and procedurally defective. Under First Circuit precedent, specifically Rodriguez versus Banco Central, 727 F2D 44, a 12b-6 motion in a foreclosure case requires—" He pauses, watching Preston scramble for his tablet. "Requires the moving party to demonstrate that no set of facts consistent with the complaint could establish a valid claim." James opens his briefcase, removing a single document. "I've prepared a brief citing 17 separate factual allegations that, if proven, would not only defeat the motion, but establish the bank's liability under both TILA and RESPA." Judge Martinez extends her hand for the brief. Preston's face has lost its smirk. "Furthermore," James continues, his voice gaining strength, "counsel's casual dismissal of consumer protection laws suggests either a worrying unfamiliarity with the Fair Lending Act or another calculated pause, as a deliberate attempt to obscure their client's systematic violations of federal banking regulations." Melissa Chen is frantically typing on her laptop. Brad Thompson has gone pale. "They're searching for the cases," James referenced, realizing too late they'd completely underestimated their opponent. "Mr. Wheeler," Judge Martinez says, studying his brief, "this is extremely well researched. Mr. Preston, would you like time to review and respond?" Preston tugs at his collar. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to... Denied. Martinez cuts him off. You filed this motion, Counselor. Either argue it now or withdraw it. James allows himself a small smile. In Vietnam, he'd learned that the first engagement sets the tone for the entire battle. Show weakness, and the enemy grows bold. Show strength, and they begin to doubt their own position. Preston rises again, his confidence visibly shaken. Your Honor, in light of new information, we withdraw the motion to dismiss. So noted. Martinez turns to James. Mr. Wheeler, the court appreciates your thorough preparation. Shall we proceed to the preliminary injunction hearing? James nods, reaching for another document in his briefcase. Ready, Your Honor. As he prepares his next argument, James catches Melissa Chen studying him with new eyes. She sees it now. The straight spine beneath the aged exterior, the tactical mind behind the silver hair. This isn't just another pro-se plaintiff fumbling through legal procedures. This is a warrior who has chosen his battlefield carefully, and the real fight is just beginning. James reaches into his briefcase, his fingers finding the familiar texture of his old case files. 20 years of military justice, preserved in manila folders and paper clips. The touch triggers a memory. Flash, int, JAG Corps, courtroom. Vietnam, 1971. A younger James stands before a military tribunal, defending a scared 19-year-old private accused of dereliction of duty. The prosecution's evidence looks overwhelming, sir, his assistant whispers. Evidence isn't the same as truth, Lieutenant, James replies. Watch and learn. Back to present. Judge Martinez's voice brings him back. Mr. Wheeler, you may present your motion for preliminary injunction. James withdraws 3 documents, arranging them with practiced precision. Your Honor, the bank's own records reveal a pattern of systematic errors in their mortgage servicing system. I draw the court's attention to Exhibit A. He places an enlarged bank statement on the projector. The corporate lawyers lean forward, suddenly alert. This algorithm error, James continues, didn't just affect my mortgage. According to the bank's internal audit. He pauses, savoring Preston's sharp intake of breath. Yes, Counselor, I filed a FOIA request. The same error affected thousands of accounts. Flash into JAG Corps office, Saigon, 1972. Sir, how did you know about the supply records? A fellow JAG officer asks. James taps a regulation manual. Always check the paper trail, Captain. The truth leaves traces if you know where to look. Back to present. Melissa Chen whispers urgently to Preston, who waves her off. Their arrogance hasn't fully cracked, yet. Your Honor, Preston interjects, these technical issues, even if proven, don't rise to the level requiring injunctive relief. James feels the familiar surge of tactical satisfaction. They've taken the bait. Counselor, he responds, his voice steady, I direct your attention to the Federal Banking Commission's Regulation Z, subsection 226.41c. He doesn't need to check his notes. These regulations, like the military codes before them, are etched in his memory. A servicer's failure to provide accurate payoff statements, James continues, watching understanding dawn in Judge Martinez's eyes, automatically triggers the right to injunctive relief. The bank's own records admit to 17 months of incorrect statements. Flash, int, Military Command Center, Vietnam, 1970. Lieutenant Wheeler, his commanding officer, says, how do you plan to win this case? The evidence. Sir, in both war and law, the key is to let the enemy think they're winning until it's too late. Back to present. Brad Thompson is now frantically paging through a banking regulation handbook. James suppresses a smile. In court, as in combat, preparation decides battles before they begin. Furthermore, James continues, removing his JAG Corps case files, there's federal precedent for this exact situation. In 1978, while serving as a JAG Corps officer, I successfully argued Martinez versus First Federal, where the Fifth Circuit held Preston finally realizes his mistake. They'd assumed James's military service was irrelevant. They hadn't bothered to check his JAG Corps record. "Your Honor," Preston interrupts, desperation creeping into his voice, "we request a brief recess to review these citations." Judge Martinez studies James over her reading glasses. "Mr. Wheeler, I must admit, your preparation is impressive. Mr. Preston, you'll have your recess. 20 minutes. She rises. "And, Counselor, I suggest you use them wisely." As the corporate lawyers hurry out, James remains seated, conserving his strength. The preliminary battle is won, but the war is far from over. He opens another file, preparing his next move. Melissa Chen lingers behind, studying him with newfound respect. "Mr. Wheeler, those case citations, they're not in any standard database." "No, Ms. Chen, they wouldn't be. Military courts taught me that justice doesn't always make the headlines." He meets her gaze, but it leaves a trail for those willing to dig deep enough. She nods slowly, then hurries to join her colleagues. James watches her go, recognizing the look in her eyes. It's the same look young officers got when they first realized that rank and power didn't always equal victory. The morning sun streams through the high courthouse windows, catching the edge of his JAG Corps badge, still in his briefcase. Some battles are fought with bullets, others with precedents and procedures, but the principles remain the same. Know your ground, study your opponent, and never ever telegraph your final move until the perfect moment. The recess ends with a subtle shift in the courtroom's atmosphere. Preston's legal team has spread out, surrounding themselves with hastily printed banking regulations and case law. Their earlier smugness has been replaced by wary attention. James uses the moment to open his military strategy manual, weathered and annotated over decades. Between sections on tactical warfare, he'd penciled in legal strategies, parallels, between battlefield and courtroom that had served him well. "Your Honor," James begins, rising slowly, "I'd like to direct the court's attention to the bank's mortgage servicing practices between 2020 and 2022. He places a document on the projector. Complex financial algorithms scroll across the screen, highlighted and annotated in his precise handwriting. "After retiring from the JAG Corps, I spent 5 years consulting for the Federal Reserve's Mortgage Fraud Division. The revelation lands like a thunderclap in the quiet courtroom. These algorithms contain what we call trapdoors, deliberate errors designed to trigger automatic payment increases. Flash, int, Federal Reserve Office, Boston, 1985. Captain Wheeler," his supervisor says, "nobody understands these banking codes better than you. It's why we hired you post-military. Sir, financial warfare isn't so different from the jungle. The traps are just better hidden." Back to present. Preston stands, objecting. "Your Honor, Mr. Wheeler's previous consulting work is irrelevant to—" "Overruled," Judge Martinez interrupts. "Continue, Mr. Wheeler." James nods, advancing to the next slide. "The bank's software uses the same code structure we identified in the 1980s banking crisis. A simple error that compounds monthly, hidden in lines of legitimate calculations." Melissa Chen's eyes widen as she follows his analysis. Her legal pad fills with rapid notes. "Your Honor," James continues, "I'm not just some homeowner confused by his mortgage statement. I helped write the federal guidelines on predatory lending algorithms. Guidelines that, according to these documents, the bank has systematically violated." He pulls out another file, printouts of the bank's internal coding documentation. Preston's face goes pale. "How did you get those?" he demands. "Through proper FOIA channels, Counselor. The bank's federal filings require full code disclosure. You'd know that if you'd actually checked my background instead of assuming I was—" James pauses, letting the moment hang. "What was it you called me in your email to the judge?" "Ah, yes, a confused old veteran in over his head." Judge Martinez's eyebrows rise. "Mr. Preston, Your Honor, I apologize for my informal characterization. Save it, she cuts him off. Mr. Wheeler, these coding violations you've identified affect approximately 18,000 mortgages in Massachusetts alone, James finishes, each one illegally inflated through hidden compounding errors. The same errors I warned the Federal Reserve about 30 years ago. The gallery, which has been slowly filling with observers, breaks into murmurs. A few reporters have slipped in, pens moving rapidly across notepads. Brad Thompson leans over to Preston, whispering urgently. The lead attorney waves him off again, but sweat has begun to bead on his forehead. James removes his reading glasses, polishing them carefully, a habit from his military days before crucial testimony. Your Honor, in 1972, I prosecuted a case involving supply requisition fraud. The perpetrators hid their theft in routine paperwork, counting on the complexity to mask their crimes. Today, we're seeing the same strategy, just with digital camouflage. He projects one final document, a comparison between the bank's algorithm and federal banking regulations. The violations are highlighted in stark red. The bank didn't expect a 72-year-old veteran to understand modern financial coding, just like those supply officers didn't expect a young JAG lawyer to understand requisition forms. James allows himself a small smile. They were wrong then too. Judge Martinez studies the evidence, her expression hardening. Mr. Preston, your response to these allegations. Preston rises, his designer suit suddenly seeming too tight. Your Honor, we need time to verify these technical claims. The code is your own, Counselor, James interjects quietly. Surely you understand how it works. The silence that follows speaks volumes. In the gallery, reporters are already slipping out to file their stories. Melissa Chen has stopped taking notes, her face a mask of growing concern. James gathers, his papers with military precision, each movement deliberate. In Vietnam, he'd learned that the moment your enemy realizes they've underestimated you is the moment the tide turns. Looking at Preston's shaken expression, he knows that moment has arrived. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The afternoon sun slants through tall windows, casting long shadows across the courtroom. James catches a glimpse of movement in the gallery. More reporters slipping in, drawn by whispered phone calls and urgent texts about the unfolding drama. He reaches into his briefcase one more time, withdrawing a single manila envelope. The bank's internal memo inside had taken months to obtain, each FOIA request carefully worded to avoid raising alarms. Your Honor, James begins, his voice steady, I'd like to enter into Evidence Exhibit D, an internal memorandum from the bank's Mortgage Servicing Division, dated January 15th, 2021. Preston practically leaps from his chair. Objection, Your Honor, any internal documents would be protected by attorney-client privilege. James allows himself a small smile. The privilege log the bank provided lists no such memo, Counselor. And as you well know, undisclosed privileged documents lose their protection. Judge Martinez nods. Proceed, Mr. Wheeler. James places the memo on the projector. The bank's letterhead glows on the screen, followed by damning words. Implementation of Revenue Enhancement Protocol Alpha, projected returns on payment recalculation. This memo, James continues, details the bank's deliberate decision to implement the fraudulent algorithm, along with projected profits from what they euphemistically called payment recalculation. Note the date, 3 months before my mortgage payments mysteriously doubled. Melissa Chen's face has gone pale. She's no longer taking notes, instead staring at the memo with growing horror. Even Brad Thompson has stopped rifling through his papers. The bank's own calculations, James says, advancing to the next page, showed that this recalculation would affect primarily elderly homeowners and veterans, people less likely to challenge the increases or understand the complex calculations involved. Flash. Int. Military briefing room, Vietnam, 1969. Remember, James tells his squad, the enemy counts on confusion. They want us lost in the jungle, but sometimes the clearest path is right through their defenses. Back to present. Your Honor, Preston stammers, these documents lack context. The bank's automated systems are complex. Yes, James interrupts softly. They counted on that complexity, didn't they? Just like they counted on their victims being too confused or intimidated to fight back. He projects another page, a list of projected foreclosures resulting from the payment increases. His name is there, along with thousands of others, each one a life disrupted, a home at risk. The gallery has grown fuller still. Among the reporters, James notices several elderly faces, other homeowners perhaps, drawn by word of mouth about the veteran taking on the banking giant. The bank's own projections, he continues, showed a success rate of 92%, meaning they expected only 8% of affected homeowners to successfully challenge these illegal increases. They calculated the likely legal costs and determined them to be, quote, acceptable losses compared to projected revenues. Judge Martinez's expression has hardened into granite. Mr. Preston, does your team wish to respond to these allegations? Preston turns to whisper urgently with his colleagues. The polished confidence of the morning has crumbled entirely. Melissa Chen shakes her head sharply at whatever he's suggesting. Your Honor, Preston says finally, we request a continuance to review these documents and consult with our clients. Denied, Martinez replies flatly. Mr. Wheeler, do you have anything further? James nods, removing his final piece of evidence. Just one more document, Your Honor. A list of all major bank executives who receive bonuses directly tied to the success of this revenue enhancement protocol. The effect is immediate. Preston fumbles for his phone, hands shaking. Brad Thompson has gone completely white, and Melissa Chen, she's staring at James with something approaching admiration. Sometimes, James says quietly, almost to himself, the best defense is a decisive offense. It's what he'd learned in combat, refined in military courts and never forgotten. When your enemy expects you to retreat, you advance. When they think you're weak, you show your strength. The afternoon light catches his JAG Corps badge, still, visible in his open briefcase. The sight steadies him, as it has so many times before. In both war and law, justice sometimes needs warriors willing to fight the hard battles. And this battle is far from over. The judge calls a brief recess, and James makes his way slowly to a wooden bench in the courthouse hallway. His leg throbs, too many hours standing, the old wounds protesting. He pulls out the small photo album he always carries, worn edges softened by years of handling. A young reporter approaches, notebook in hand, but stops short when she sees him studying a photograph of Margaret on their wedding day, 1973. She quietly retreats, recognizing a private moment. The image shows Margaret beaming in her simple white dress, James still in his military uniform. They couldn't afford much then, but her smile lit up the entire VA chapel. Wish you could see this, Maggie, he whispers, touching the photo gently. You always said the truth would come out eventually. His hands shake slightly as he turns the page, medication wearing off. The next photo shows their modest house the day they bought it, Margaret planting roses that would bloom for decades. The same house the bank is trying to take. A familiar voice interrupts his reverie. Mr. Wheeler? Melissa Chen stands before him, holding a paper cup of water. I thought you might... I noticed you didn't have any water during... He accepts the cup with a nod of thanks. Thoughtful of you, Ms. Chen. She hesitates, then sits beside him. Sir, what you said about the algorithm affecting veterans specifically, she glances at the photo album. My grandfather was in Vietnam too. He lost his house in the 2008 crisis. Nobody fought for him. James studies her face, seeing past the expensive suit to something familiar, the look of someone questioning which side of justice they're serving. It's never too late to fight for what's right, Ms. Chen. Before she can respond, Preston's sharp voice cuts across the hallway. Melissa, strategy meeting now. She rises quickly, but pauses. Mr. Wheeler, there's something you should know about the Bank Settlement Authority. Melissa! Preston calls again. She hurries away, leaving James with his thoughts and his photographs. He turns another page. Tommy's law school graduation. His grandson stands proud in his cap and gown, arm around James's shoulders. The photo was taken just months before the bank's error began draining James's savings. More people fill the hallway now. An elderly woman approaches, introducing herself as Patricia Martinez. I saw the news alert about your case, she says. They did the same thing to my mortgage last year. I couldn't fight them, couldn't afford a lawyer. Others gather around, sharing similar stories. A retired school teacher, a former postal worker, a Vietnam vet in a wheelchair. All victims of the same algorithm error. James's phone buzzes. A text from Tommy. You're trending on Twitter, Grandpa. Veteran Justice is spreading your story. Keep fighting. The old warrior in him wants to press the advantage, but his body reminds him of its limitations. The tremor in his hands has worsened, and spots dance at the edges of his vision.
He hasn't taken his heart medication, couldn't risk in court. Mr. Wheeler and Judge Martinez, that the bank's counsel has requested an emergency conference in chambers.
Gathering his strength, he tucks the photo album away, but not before touching Margaret's face one last time. Almost there, love. The small crowd parts respectfully as he stands. Patricia Martinez touches his arm. We're all behind you, Mr. Wheeler. Show them what we older folks can do. His leg protests each step, but his spine remains straight. The physical pain is nothing compared to the pain of watching neighbors lose their homes, of seeing fellow veterans stripped of their dignity by corporate greed. At the chamber doors, he pauses, remembering Margaret's words the day he decided to become a lawyer. The hardest battles are the ones worth fighting, James. And you've never walked away from a hard battle. No, he hasn't, and he won't start now, no matter the cost. The judge's chambers feel smaller, with 6 people crowded inside. Judge Martinez sits behind her desk, Preston and his team on one side, James standing alone on the other. A thick settlement agreement lies on the polished mahogany between them. $1 million, Mr. Wheeler, Preston says, his voice eager. Plus, we'll forgive your mortgage entirely. Just sign the non-disclosure agreement and walk away. James studies the document, remembering another offer of silence from long ago. Flash. Int. Military base. Vietnam. 1969. A younger James stands before his commanding officer, jaw set firmly. Lieutenant Wheeler, this goes above our pay grade. Sign the papers, forget what you saw, and go home with a silver star. Sir, with respect, 4 good men died because of that supply chain corruption. I won't pretend it didn't happen. Back to present. Mr. Wheeler, Judge Martinez prompts gently. The offer seems quite generous. James lifts his eyes from the settlement. Papers. Your Honor, how many others got this same offer from the bank? How many took it because they were scared or desperate? Preston shifts uncomfortably. This is a private settlement discussion. No, James cuts in, his voice hardening. This is about justice, about responsibility. He turns to face Preston directly. Did you know that 3 veterans in my neighborhood lost their homes last month? Good people who served their country, now living with their children because they couldn't afford the bank's recalculated payments. Melissa Chen looks down at her hands. Brad Thompson suddenly finds the window. Fascinating. The settlement is confidential, Preston insists. If you sign now, if I sign now, the truth stays buried, James finishes, just like they wanted to bury the truth in '69. He straightens his spine, ignoring the pain. I didn't sell my... Silence then. I won't sell it now. Flash. Int. Military Courthouse, Vietnam, 1969. Lieutenant Wheeler, the JAG prosecutor warns, this case could end your career before it begins. James adjusts his uniform. Some things matter more than careers, sir. Some fights you have to see through to the end. Back to present. Judge Martinez leans forward. Mr. Wheeler, As much as I admire your principles, you should consider. I have considered, Your Honor. I've considered every neighbor who lost their home, every veteran who couldn't fight back, every elderly couple forced into bankruptcy. James's voice carries the weight of decades of battles, won and lost. This isn't just about my mortgage anymore. A knock at the door interrupts. The court clerk enters with a note for Judge Martinez. She reads it, eyebrows rising. It seems Mr. Wheeler's case has attracted attention. The State Attorney General's office has filed a motion to intervene. She looks at Preston. They're particularly interested in those internal memos. Preston's face goes ashen. Melissa Chen suddenly stands. Mr. Wheeler is right. The algorithm wasn't an error. It was deliberate. I have proof. Melissa, Preston snaps, but she continues. Emails, meeting minutes, everything. I can't be part of this anymore. She pulls a USB drive from her pocket. It's all here, Your Honor. James watches the young lawyer's act of conscience, remembering his own moment of truth in that Vietnamese courthouse. Some battles choose their warriors. The offer is withdrawn, Preston announces, gathering his papers frantically. No, James says quietly. The offer was rejected. There's a difference. One suggests retreat. The other, he touches his Medal of Honor through his jacket. The other means we've found our ground, and we're holding it. Judge Martinez studies him thoughtfully. We'll reconvene in 15 minutes. Mr. Preston, I suggest you contact your clients. Ms. Chen, my clerk will secure that drive. She turns to James. Mr. Wheeler, well fought. As they file out, James pauses by the window. The afternoon sun catches his reflection. Not just an old veteran anymore, but a warrior who never forgot his purpose. In his mind, he hears Margaret's voice. Some battles you fight for yourself, others you fight for everyone who can't. He straightens his tie, checks his ammunition, legal papers and evidence carefully organized, and prepares for the next phase. The bank thought they could bury the truth in paperwork and technical jargon. They forgot that some old soldiers know exactly how to navigate hostile territory. And this old soldier still remembers the most important lesson from Vietnam. When you find something worth fighting for, you never retreat. The courtroom has transformed. Where there were empty benches this morning, now every seat is filled. Veterans in aged uniforms sit shoulder to shoulder with elderly homeowners. Reporters line the walls, smartphones ready. James stands at his table, Melissa Chen's USB drive, now safely logged into evidence. Behind him, he hears Patricia Martinez whispering to other victims. That's him. That's the veteran who figured it out. Judge Martinez calls the court to order. Given recent developments and Ms. Chen's evidence, this hearing will now address the motion for class certification. Preston, now flanked by 3 new lawyers, from the bank's headquarters rises to object. But before he can speak, the courtroom doors burst open. Catherine Walsh, 50s, Assistant State Attorney General, strides in, followed by her team. Your Honor, the Commonwealth of Massachusetts moves to intervene in this proceeding. James recognizes her from his Federal Reserve days, a fierce advocate for consumer protection. Their eyes meet briefly, a silent acknowledgement passing between old warriors. Furthermore, Walsh continues, we're seeking an immediate injunction, freezing all foreclosure proceedings initiated by the bank under their recalculation program. Preston's reinforcements shuffle papers nervously. The bank's general counsel whispers urgently in his ear. James seizes the moment. Your Honor, I'd like to direct the court's attention to Ms. Chen's evidence, specifically the email chain dated March 2022. He projects the first email. The bank's executives discuss the success of their program. Foreclosure rates exceeding projections. Elderly targets especially vulnerable. Legal challenges minimal. A low murmur rises from the gallery. James notices several people wiping tears. In light of this evidence, he continues, I move to expand the class to include all affected homeowners in New England, not just Massachusetts. Walsh nods approvingly. The Commonwealth supports this motion, Your Honor. Our preliminary investigation suggests similar patterns in all 6 states. Judge Martinez reviews the emails, her expression darkening. Mr. Preston, does your team wish to respond to this evidence? But Preston has lost control of his defense. The bank's general counsel takes over, his corporate demeanor cracking slightly. Your Honor, we request a brief recess to confer with our clients. Denied. Martinez cuts in. Ms. Chen, please approach the bench. Melissa steps forward, her posture straight despite Preston's glare. Yes, Your Honor? These emails indicate knowledge of the scheme reached the executive level. Is there documentation of their direct involvement? Yes, Your Honor. Melissa glances at James. Mr. Wheeler's FOIA requests only scratched the surface. The internal audit trail shows systematic targeting of vulnerable homeowners, with quarterly bonuses tied to foreclosure rates. The gallery erupts in angry murmurs. James spots news photographers capturing the moment, an old veteran and a young lawyer standing together against corporate greed. Order! Judge Martinez commands. She turns to James. Mr. Wheeler, given these developments, how do you wish to proceed? James feels the weight of every eye in the courtroom. Behind him sit people who've lost homes, savings, dignity. Before him stand the architects of their suffering, their expensive suits no longer armor enough. Your Honor, we seek immediate appointment of a special master to review all affected mortgages. Additionally, he removes his final piece of evidence, the military service records of affected veterans. We request priority relief for service members targeted by this scheme. Walsh steps forward. The Commonwealth joins in these requests, Your Honor. We're also preparing criminal referrals to the U.S. Attorney's Office. The bank's general counsel blanches. Whispers ripple through the corporate legal team as the full impact of their situation hits home. James remains standing, his posture military straight despite his fatigue. The afternoon light streams through the high windows, catching his JAG Corps badge, still visible in his open briefcase. Its gleam reminds him of another badge. Decades ago in Vietnam, when he first learned that true victory sometimes means fighting not just for yourself, but for everyone who can't fight back. Judge Martinez surveys the packed courtroom, then focuses on James. Mr. Wheeler, you've done more than expose a banking scandal. You've given voice to thousands who thought they were fighting alone. She turns to the bank's legal team, her voice stern. Gentlemen, I suggest you advise your clients to prepare for a very thorough investigation. Court is adjourned until tomorrow morning. As the gallery erupts in relieved conversation, James catches sight of a familiar face in the crowd. Tommy, his grandson, grinning proudly. The young lawyer gives him a thumbs up, mouthing the words, "You did it, Grandpa." But James knows this is just the beginning. The real battle, making sure justice reaches every victim, still lies ahead. James arrives early to find the conference room already occupied. A dozen veterans, spanning conflicts from Vietnam to Afghanistan, sit around the table. At their head is Colonel Robert Martinez, 75, a decorated Marine Corps judge advocate. James Wheeler, the colonel says, rising, your JAG Corps reputation precedes you. We've been following your case. James recognizes faces from VA support groups, from memorial services, from quiet nods exchanged at the coffee shop near the VFW hall. Brothers in arms, even if they'd never served together. The American Legion has authorized me to offer our full support, Martinez continues. We've got 300 cases documented already, veterans targeted specifically because they had VA benefits as guaranteed income. A younger veteran, Sergeant Sarah Collins, 35, spreads out a map marked with red dots. Each point represents a veteran who lost their home or is fighting foreclosure. The pattern's too clear to be coincidence. James studies the map, his jaw tightening. The dots cluster around VA hospitals, military bases, retirement communities. The conference room door opens. Catherine Walsh enters with her investigative team, followed by reporters from major networks. Camera lights flick on. Mr. Wheeler, Walsh announces, we've confirmed what you suspected. The bank's algorithm specifically flagged military service as a favorable foreclosure indicator. They counted on veterans being too proud to ask for help. The room erupts in angry mutters. James raises his hand for quiet, a gesture that still commands respect. They miscalculated, he says simply. They forgot that military training isn't just about fighting, it's about standing together, supporting your unit. Colonel Martinez nods. And this is our new mission. Every veteran affected gets legal support. The Legion's lawyers are filing amicus briefs in all 6 New England states. Flash, Inti Military Hospital, Vietnam, 1970. A wounded James lies in his hospital bed as fellow soldiers visit. We've got your back, Lieutenant, they say. No, man left behind. Back to present, the door opens again. Melissa Chen enters, carrying a stack of internal bank documents. Her eyes are tired. She's been up all night analyzing evidence. I've found something else, she says. The bank didn't just target veterans. They specifically focused on older vets, assuming they wouldn't understand modern banking technology. She projects an email on the wall. Senior veterans present optimal foreclosure opportunities. Historical respect for authority makes them less likely to challenge payment increases. The room falls silent. James feels the old familiar anger, not the hot rage of youth, but the cold, focused determination that wins wars. Sergeant Collins stands. Sir, permission to share my story with the press? They need to understand this isn't just about numbers. James nods. Cameras turn as she speaks about her grandmother, a Wallaby Tutu Navy nurse, who lost her home of 50 years to the bank's scheme. More veterans step forward. A Desert Storm pilot who fought in the air and now fights for closure. An Iraq war medic whose retirement dreams crumbled under artificial debt. Each story adds fuel to the fire. Catherine Walsh takes notes rapidly. This goes beyond civil charges now. We're looking at criminal violations of the Service Members Civil Relief Act. Colonel Martinez turns to James. The Legion's veteran service officers are spreading the word nationally. By tomorrow, you'll have 10,000 case files on your desk. We'll need help, James says. Legal teams in every state. Already happening, Walsh replies. State AGs across the country are launching investigations. The media's calling it Operation Payback. James removes his old service record from his briefcase. Then let's give them a real story, not just about what the bank did wrong, but about how veterans stand together, how we fight back. The younger veterans lean forward as he speaks. In their eyes, he sees the same fire that once burned in his own, the need to serve, to protect, to make things right. Melissa steps forward. Mr. Wheeler, the bank's CEO, is flying in for emergency meetings. They're talking about a global settlement. Let them talk, James replies. We're not fighting for settlements anymore. We're fighting for justice. The room fills with nods of agreement. On the wall-mounted TV, cable news channels run footage of veterans gathering outside bank branches nationwide. The hashtag #VeteranJustice trends across social media. Colonel Martinez places a hand on James's shoulder. You started something. Bigger than one case, son. You gave us a new mission. James looks around the room at his brothers and sisters in arms. In their faces, he sees not just anger at injustice, but determination to make it right. The bank thought they were targeting isolated individuals. Instead, they'd awakened an army. Together, he says quietly, just like always. James sits reviewing depositions when rapid footsteps approach. Brad Thompson bursts in, clutching a laptop, his expensive suit wrinkled from hours of work. Mr. Wheeler, he pants, you need to see this, now. Melissa Chen follows close behind, quickly closing the door. The young lawyers exchange glances before Brad opens his laptop. I was preparing for tomorrow's hearing when I found these emails. They're from the bank's compliance department. His hands shake slightly. They warned senior management 3 times. James leans forward, reading. Internal memos from the bank's compliance officers dated months before the algorithm launched. Urgent. Proposed payment recalculation system violates federal banking regulations. Legal exposure significant. Veteran targeting creates additional liability. They knew, Melissa says quietly. The compliance team tried to stop it. Brad scrolls to another email. Look at the response from the CEO. The reply is brief. Compliance. Concerns noted. Proceed with implementation. Legal costs factored into profit projections. James feels a familiar chill, the same one he'd felt in Vietnam when discovering supply officers had knowingly sent troops into combat with defective equipment. Some enemies wear the same uniform. There's more, Brad continues. The bank fired 3 compliance officers who protested, made them sign NDAs. But those agreements wouldn't cover criminal activity, James says, his legal mind engaging. Where are these officers now? Melissa pulls out her phone. I can find out. One of them was my mentor during my summer internship. A knock at the door makes them all jump. Catherine Walsh enters with Colonel Martinez. Perfect timing, James says. Brad just found something. As they review the evidence, Walsh's expression hardens. This proves knowledge at the highest levels. But we need those compliance officers to testify. Already on it, Melissa says, typing rapidly. Maria Santos, former head of compliance. She's teaching at Boston College now. She looks up. She'll talk. Brad runs his hand through his disheveled hair. The bank's board meets tomorrow morning. When they see these emails, they'll try to contain it, Colonel Martinez interjects. Sacrifice a few executives, claim it was rogue elements. James shakes his head. Not this time. He turns to Brad. Why did you bring this to us? The young lawyer straightens his spine. My grandfather. He lost his farm in the 80s to predatory lending. I became a lawyer to prevent that from happening. To others, he laughs bitterly. Instead, I almost helped it happen again. Another knock. A court clerk enters with breaking news. The bank's stock is plunging. Rumors of the compliance emails have leaked. James watches the young lawyers. Brad with his newfound conscience, Melissa with her quiet determination. He remembers other young officers in Vietnam facing similar moments of truth. Brad, he says carefully, testifying against your own firm will end your career there. I know. Brad manages a small smile, but like you said yesterday, some things matter more than careers. Melissa puts a hand on his shoulder. The state AG's office will need good lawyers who understand banking. Law. Walsh nods. My team could use reinforcements. The room's energy shifts as plans form. Maria Santos agrees to testify. 2 other compliance officers signal their willingness to break their NDAs. Brad's laptop reveals more damning emails. James sits back, watching the younger generation take up the fight. In Vietnam, he'd learned that victory often depends on people inside the enemy's ranks choosing truth over loyalty. His phone buzzes, a text from Tommy. Grandpa, you're all over the news. CNN wants an interview. But James is focused on the former bank lawyers, now working late into the night, using their insider knowledge to expose the truth. The bank had built its walls high, but failed to account for conscience. We'll need to move fast, Walsh says. Once the board meets tomorrow, they're already moving, Colonel Martinez reports, checking his phone. Private jets filed flight plans, CEOs heading to Switzerland. Let them run, James says quietly. The evidence is here. The witnesses are ready. He looks at Brad and Melissa, and now we have guides through their paper jungle. The young lawyers nod, understanding the reference to his Vietnam tactics. Sometimes the best intelligence comes from those who've switched sides. Outside the window, the evening sun glints off the courthouse dome. Another battle approaches, but this time with unexpected allies. The bank's own soldiers are turning against them, armed with the truth they tried to bury. The courtroom buzzes with tension. Every seat is filled. Veterans, reporters, bank executives summoned from their board meeting. The bank's legal team has swollen to 12 lawyers, their tables straining under mountains of documents. James stands alone at his table, calm in his pressed suit. Behind him sit Maria Santos and the other former compliance officers, ready to testify. Brad and Melissa now sit with the state AG's team. Judge Martinez enters, her expression grave. Given yesterday's developments and the new evidence, we're here to consider the motion for immediate injunctive relief and appointment of a receiver. The bank's new lead counsel, Edward Blackwood, 60s, rises. His reputation for aggressive corporate defense precedes him. Your Honor, these 11th-hour allegations are mere speculation. The bank's algorithm was fully compliant with all regulations. James stands slowly, letting the silence build. A technique he'd learned in countless courts-martial. Sometimes the pause speaks louder than words. Your Honor, I call Maria Santos as our first witness. Santos takes the stand, her former position lending weight to every word. She describes the compliance team's warnings, their desperate attempts to stop the program. We ran the numbers, she testifies. The algorithm specifically targeted zip codes with high concentrations of elderly veterans. It was designed to trigger automatic payment increases that would compound faster than VA benefits could adjust. Blackwood objects repeatedly, but the evidence is overwhelming. James maintains his steady pace, building the case methodically. Ms. Santos, what happened when you presented these concerns to senior management? They said the projected profits outweighed the legal risks. Then they fired us and forced us to sign non-disclosure agreements. The gallery murmurs. James removes a document from his briefcase. Your Honor, I present Exhibit 47, the bank's internal profit projections showing expected foreclosure rates by veteran status. He places it on the projector. The numbers are damning. Columns of calculations showing how much more profitable veteran foreclosures were thanks to guaranteed VA income that could be garnished. Blackwood rises. Your Honor, these documents are privileged. No, Counselor, James counters. They'd lost privilege protection when they were used to further an ongoing criminal enterprise. The crime-fraud exception applies. Judge Martinez nods. Proceed, Mr. Wheeler. James turns to his final exhibit. The bank's own records show they targeted over 30,000 veterans across New England. But they made one crucial mistake. He projects a military training document. His own handwritten notes from JAG Corps days. They forgot that military service teaches more than combat. It teaches strategy, documentation, and most importantly, he faces the bank executives. It teaches us to never abandon our own. The courtroom stills. Even Blackwood seems to sense the shifting tide. Your Honor, James continues, I'm not just moving for an injunction now. Given the evidence of systematic fraud, I'm moving for the immediate appointment of a receiver to take control of all relevant bank operations. Blackwood explodes. This is unprecedented. You can't expect... Actually, James interrupts quietly, there is precedent. He nods to Brad, who distributes copies of an old case. United States versus First National Trust, 1973. A case I argued as a young JAG officer involving systematic fraud against military families. He lets that sink in. The bank executives shift uncomfortably. The court appointed a receiver then, and that receiver discovered the full scope of the fraud, just as a receiver now will discover how far this scheme really goes. Judge Martinez studies the precedent carefully. Years of judicial experience tell her this is a turning point. Mr. Blackwood, does the bank wish to respond? The corporate lawyer glances at his clients, seeing fear replace arrogance. The CEO whispers urgently in his ear. Your Honor, Blackwood says finally, we request a brief recess to confer. No, James's voice cuts through the courtroom. No more delays, no more hiding behind procedure. These people, he gestures to the gallery of veterans, have waited long enough for justice. The judge looks out at the packed courtroom, the elderly veterans, the former compliance officers, the young lawyers who chose conscience over career. Then she looks at James, seeing not just an old warrior, but the embodiment of justice itself. Motion granted, she declares. I'm appointing a receiver effective immediately. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. The gallery erupts, reporters rush for the doors, phones already dialing. The bank executives sit shell-shocked as federal marshals move to secure their documents. James remains standing straight and tall. In his mind, he hears Margaret's voice. Sometimes the biggest victories come from the quietest warriors. The battle isn't over, but the tide has turned, and this old soldier still knows how to lead a charge. The large conference room has transformed into a command center. Maps cover the walls, marked with red pins showing affected veterans nationwide. Computer screens display real-time data as teams process thousands of cases. James stands at the center. His JAG Corps strategy maps spread across the table. Around him, a coalition has formed. State AG teams, veteran service officers, former bank employees turned whistleblowers. Latest numbers, Catherine Walsh announces, entering with fresh reports. 65,000 affected veterans identified across 28 states. The receivers team found evidence of similar algorithms at 6 other major banks. Colonel Martinez points to clusters on the map, patterns consistent. They targeted communities near VA hospitals, military bases, anywhere veterans congregate. Melissa and Brad work with their teams, analyzing data streams. Their defection has inspired others. 23 bank employees have come forward with evidence. Mr. Wheeler, Brad calls out, you need to see this. The algorithm wasn't just targeting veterans. It was designed to evolve, to learn which demographics were least likely to fight back. James moves to Brad's screen, studying the code. It reminds him of something. Flash Int. Military Intelligence Office, Vietnam, 1970. The enemy adapts, Lieutenant Wheeler, his commander explains. Each tactic we counter, they evolve. We have to think 3 moves ahead. Back to present. They built it to learn, James says, understanding dawning. Each successful foreclosure taught it to find similar targets. Sarah Collins, now coordinating. Veteran outreach, looks up from her laptop. Sir, CNN's outside. They're calling this the biggest banking scandal since 2008. Let them wait, James replies. We focus on the mission first. Tommy arrives, carrying fresh coffee for everyone. He's taken leave from his law firm to join the fight. Grandpa, the American Bar Association is creating a task force. They want you to chair it. James shakes his head. They need younger blood. Recommend Colonel Martinez. He turns to the maps. Again, how many homes can we save? Maria Santos, working with the receivers team, pulls up new data. With the emergency injunction in place, we've frozen all fraudulent foreclosures. But getting people back into their homes will take time, Walsh finishes. But we've got precedent now. Mr. Wheeler's case created the blueprint. The room hums with purpose. Young lawyers work alongside veteran service officers, sharing knowledge, building cases. What started as one old soldier's stand has become a movement. A clerk enters with breaking news. The bank's board has fired the CEO. Criminal indictments are expected tomorrow. They'll try to blame it all on a few executives, Colonel Martinez warns. Protect the institution. Not this time, James says, firmly. The receiver has their whole playbook now, no more hiding. He studies the faces around him. Brad's determination to make amends, Melissa's unwavering dedication, Tommy's proud smile. This is how victories are won. Not alone, but together. His phone buzzes. A text from Mrs. Chen, his neighbor. Just got word from the receiver's office. They're reversing my foreclosure. Thank you, James. Similar messages flood in from across the country. Veterans sharing stories of hope restored, homes saved, dignity reclaimed. Mr. Wheeler, Walsh calls softly. The Senate Banking Committee is requesting your testimony next week. James nods, unsurprised. The spotlight doesn't interest him, but if his testimony can help change the system. Sir, Brad asks, how did you know? That first day in court. How did you know we'd find all this? James picks up his old JAG Corps badge, its surface reflecting the evening light. In Vietnam, I learned that the biggest targets often have the biggest blind spots. They never expect a direct attack. He looks around the room, at the maps and screens, the teams working late into the night, the alliance of young and old fighting for justice. They thought they were targeting the vulnerable, he continues. Instead, they united us, gave us a common mission. Colonel Martinez raises his coffee cup. To the mission. The room echoes the salute. Outside, cameras flash as more reporters gather. The story grows, but in here, the real work continues. James turns back to the maps, to the thousands of pins representing lives disrupted. Tomorrow will bring Senate hearings, criminal charges, more battles to fight. But tonight, in this makeshift war room, an old veteran leads one last campaign, and his army grows stronger by the hour. James Wheeler sits at the witness table, his Medal of Honor visible on his suit lapel. Behind him, rows of veterans fill the gallery. Before him, senators from both parties lean forward, waiting. Mr. Wheeler, the committee chair begins. You've uncovered what appears to be the largest systematic banking fraud targeting veterans in our nation's history. Please explain how this scheme operated. James adjusts his microphone, his voice steady. They weaponized our trust, Senator. Used artificial intelligence to identify veterans least likely to challenge them. Counted on our generation's respect for authority to silence us. He removes a single piece of paper from his briefcase, his original mortgage statement. This document started my investigation. One payment increase that made no sense, but it led to thousands more. Each one a story of betrayal. The room falls silent as James methodically lays out the evidence. Bank executives shift uncomfortably in their seats, waiting their turn to testify. The algorithm, he continues, was designed to learn from each successful foreclosure. It identified patterns: elderly veterans, disabled veterans, widows of service members. The more vulnerable the target, the more aggressive the tactics. Flash, int military courtroom, Vietnam, 1971. The truth is like a map, Lieutenant Wheeler, his mentor advises. Guide them through it step by step. Back to present, James points to the charts prepared by Walsh's team. These are not just statistics, Senators. Each number represents a family, a home, a lifetime of service rewarded with calculated fraud. The bank's new CEO, watching from the gallery, whispers urgently to his lawyers. But James isn't finished. Yesterday, I visited a VA hospital in Boston, met a veteran who fought in Afghanistan. Lost his home while deployed because the bank's algorithm marked active duty service members as high-value targets. Cameras flash. Senators exchange glances. This is no longer about one bank or one case. Mr. Wheeler, a senator asks, what do you recommend as remedy? James straightens in his chair. Criminal prosecution of those responsible, immediate restoration of all foreclosed properties, and most importantly, he faces the banking executives directly. Reform of a system that treats veterans as targets instead of citizens they swore to protect. Cut to int Boston Federal Courthouse, courtroom 3, afternoon. Hours later, James stands before Judge Martinez for the final hearing. The gallery overflows with supporters. National news networks broadcast live. Your Honor, he begins. The receiver's final report confirms over 100,000 affected veterans nationwide. Today, we seek not just compensation, but accountability. He submits his final brief, the product of countless hours, decades of legal experience, and the combined efforts of hundreds of supporters. This case began with one veteran refusing to be silenced. It ends with the voices of thousands being heard. The bank's lawyers remain seated, their fight gone. Behind them, federal agents wait with warrants for former executives. The proposed settlement agreement includes full restitution, criminal accountability, and fundamental reform of banking practices targeting veterans. James pauses, feeling the weight of the moment. But more importantly, it includes truth. Brad and Melissa, now with the AG's office, nod in approval. They helped draft the agreement, turning their insider knowledge into a blueprint for reform. No more hidden algorithms, no more predatory targeting, and no more counting on veterans being too proud or too trusting to fight back. Judge Martinez studies the settlement terms. In her decades on the bench, few cases have mattered more. "Mr. Wheeler," she says finally, "when you first appeared in this courtroom, they thought you were just another old veteran who didn't understand banking. Law." James allows himself a small smile. "A common mistake, Your Honor, underestimating old veterans." "Indeed." She signs the order. Settlement approved. And Mr. Wheeler, well fought. The gallery erupts in applause. Tommy hugs his grandfather.
Colonel Martinez salutes, but James says photograph his briefcase on their wedding day, young and full of dreams.
"We did it, love," he whispers. "We made it right." Outside, reporters clamor for statements. Congressional staffers discuss new legislation. But in the quiet of the courtroom, an old soldier completes his final mission. The late afternoon sun streams through the windows, catching his Medal of Honor. Not all battles are fought with weapons. Some are won with courage, truth, and the unwavering conviction that justice matters. And sometimes the most important victories come from those everyone else underestimated. The courthouse steps teem with people as James emerges. Veterans young and old stand at attention, forming an impromptu honor guard. News cameras capture the moment as he descends, Tommy supporting his arm. Patricia Martinez pushes through the crowd, tears in her eyes. "They called me an hour ago. I get my house back. My grandchildren can come home." Similar stories echo through the crowd. A Vietnam vet in a wheelchair, VA called. They're expediting all the reversed foreclosures. An elderly widow. "Bank's already sent my refund check." Catherine Walsh approaches with the first batch of settlement documents. "It's already happening, Mr. Wheeler. The receiver's team is processing claims nationwide. Priority processing for elderly and disabled veterans." Colonel Martinez steps forward. "The American Legion's setting up help centers at every post, making sure no veteran falls through the cracks this time." James watches as Melissa and Brad coordinate with veteran service officers, explaining the settlement terms in plain language. The young lawyers have found their true calling, using their skills to protect, not exploit. "Mr. Wheeler," reporters call out, "what's your message to other banks using similar algorithms?" He turns, voice carrying across the crowd. "Check your code, check your conscience, because we're checking both from now on." Flash, Int Military Courthouse, Vietnam, 1972. "Victory isn't just winning the case, Lieutenant," his mentor says. "It's changing the system that made it necessary." Back to present. Inside his briefcase, his phone buzzes constantly. Messages from veterans across the country sharing their stories. A commander from his old JAG unit. "You showed them what military justice really means." Sarah Collins approaches with her laptop. "Sir, look at this. Other banks are voluntarily disclosing their targeting algorithms. They're afraid of being next." Tommy grins. "They should be. Grandpa created a whole new type of class action. Harvard Law's already adding it to their curriculum." James watches as Mrs. Chen hugs her grandchildren on the courthouse steps. Behind. Then bank executives exit quietly through side doors, their arrogance replaced by handcuffs and shame. Maria Santos joins him, proudness in her voice. The Compliance Officers Association is creating new guidelines. They're calling them the Wheeler Protocols, protecting whistleblowers who expose predatory banking practices. A young veteran in dress uniform steps forward, saluting sharply. "Staff Sergeant Mike Reynolds, sir. You saved my parents' home while I was deployed. I just wanted to say..." "At ease, Sergeant," James says softly. "We take care of our own." The crowd parts as Judge Martinez emerges. She surveys the scene. Veterans helping veterans fill out claims forms, young lawyers volunteering there. Time, families reuniting with hope restored. "Mr. Wheeler," she says, "when you first walked into my courtroom, I thought this would be a simple foreclosure case. Nothing simple about justice, Your Honor." She nods. "The Judicial Conference is recommending new procedures based on your case, making sure elderly plaintiffs get proper attention, not just quick dismissals." The afternoon sun bathes the courthouse in golden light. James remembers another victory decades ago in Vietnam, when justice prevailed against all odds. "Grandpa," Tommy says, "they want you to speak at the VA tomorrow. Thousands of veterans are still coming forward." But James is watching Brad help an elderly veteran with paperwork. Melissa explains settlement terms to a worried family. Colonel Martinez organized teams to reach disabled vets who can't travel. This is the real victory. Not just winning the case, but building a network of protection, ensuring no veteran fights alone again. His phone buzzes one last time. A message from the Senate committee. New legislation being drafted. The Veterans Banking Protection Act. "Mr. Wheeler," Walsh calls out, "we need your input on the settlement distribution plan." He nods, turning back to the work at hand. The headlines will fade, but the impact remains. In offices across the country, bankers are reviewing their algorithms, remembering what happened when they underestimated an old veteran with a cause. And in homes across New England, families are returning to places they thought lost forever. Each key turned, each door reopened, a reminder that justice may be slow, but it comes to those who fight with honor. The sun sets on the courthouse as James Wheeler, veteran lawyer, warrior for justice, leads his newest band of brothers and sisters toward tomorrow's battles. Some victories echo far beyond the battlefield where they're won. What was once an abandoned storefront has transformed into a bustling advocacy center. Veterans of all ages work at computer stations, helping others navigate settlement claims. On the wall, a digital counter tracks progress. 47,382 homes restored. James sits with a group of elderly veterans, explaining their rights under the new banking regulations. His leg still aches, but the victories make it easier to bear. "Remember," he tells them, "they're required to provide clear documentation now. No more hidden fees, no more algorithmic targeting. If anything looks wrong, we're here to help." Brad enters, carrying fresh case files. He's left his corporate suit behind, now wearing the simple attire of a public service lawyer. "Sir, you should see this. 3 more banks have voluntarily disclosed their practices. They're requesting guidance on compliance. Flash, INT, military classroom, Vietnam. 1971. The best victory," James lectures young officers, "is the one that prevents future battles." Back to present. Melissa arrives with Sarah Collins, both carrying laptops. "The Wheeler protocols are working," Melissa reports. "Whistleblower hotlines are lighting up across the financial sector. Banks are self-reporting discriminatory practices before they get caught. And getting ahead of the problem," Sarah adds. "The American Legion's Financial Oversight Committee has direct lines to every major bank's compliance department now." Through the window, James watches Mrs. Chen teaching other elderly homeowners how to check their mortgage statements. The community that once suffered in silence now stands united, informed, empowered. Tommy bursts in, excitement on his face. "Grandpa, the law school called. They want you to help design their new Veterans Advocacy Clinic." James shakes his head. "Tell them to call Colonel Martinez. The next generation needs younger teachers." "They want both of you," Tommy insists. Experience and innovation working together. Catherine Walsh arrives with Maria Santos, both carrying settlement updates. "The reforms are spreading," Walsh announces. "State regulators nationwide are adopting the Wheeler standards. No more predatory algorithms targeting vulnerable populations. And the compliance departments have real power now," Maria adds. "No more ignoring their warnings." James opens his briefcase, touching the worn photo of Margaret. She would have loved. Seeing this, justice flowing out like ripples in a pond, touching life after life. A young veteran approaches hesitantly. "Sir, My grandmother's facing foreclosure in Texas. Different bank, but similar tactics. Sit down, son, James says warmly. Let's take a look. Brad and Melissa immediately move to help. The skills honed in corporate law now serving a different purpose. This is what victory really means. Not just winning one case, but changing how the game is played. Outside, more veterans arrive seeking help. Each one carries a story. Each story now has a chance for justice. The center has become more than a building. It's become a symbol of hope, a testament to what happens when people stand together. James watches his impromptu family at work. Brad mentoring young lawyers, Melissa drafting new protection protocols, Sarah coordinating with veteran groups nationwide. Even the bank's algorithm, designed to isolate and exploit, had ultimately failed in its mission. Instead of dividing, it had united. Mr. Wheeler, Walsh calls, the Senate committee needs your input on the final regulatory language. He nods, turning back to the work at hand. The headlines have faded, but the real impact is only beginning. In bank offices across the country, algorithms are being rewritten, practices reformed, lessons learned. And in communities like his, veterans are coming home again. Not just to houses, but to neighborhoods where people look out for each other, where experience is respected, where justice isn't just a word in a law book. The morning sun streams through the center's windows, catching his Medal of Honor. Some battles are fought with weapons, others with wisdom, but the greatest victories are the ones that light the way forward for others. James Wheeler, old soldier, veteran advocate, teacher of justice, opens another case file. The war for fairness never really ends. But now, thanks to one old veteran who refused to retreat, thousands more stand ready to fight on. The lecture hall hums with energy as James wheels himself to the podium. His leg finally demanded surgery, but he refused to let it stop his work. Before him sit 200 students, veterans, lawyers, advocates, all part of the first Veterans Financial Justice Program. The law, he begins, is more than words on paper. It's a shield for those who need protection, a sword for those fighting injustice. But most importantly, it's a light that shows the way forward. Colonel Martinez stands at the back, nodding approval. The program they've built together combines military precision with legal expertise, creating a new generation of advocates. Brad and Melissa team teach the technical section, breaking down complex banking regulations into clear strategies. Their corporate experience, once used to defend banks, now serves to protect veterans. The Wheeler protocols aren't just guidelines, Melissa explains. They're a roadmap for systemic change. Every algorithm must now be transparent, every targeting strategy examined for discriminatory impact. James watches Tommy in the front row, taking notes. His grandson has become the program's youngest instructor, teaching other young lawyers how to spot predatory patterns. Flash, in T, JAG Corps classroom, Vietnam, 1972. Knowledge passed on, James tells his students, becomes wisdom that protects generations. Back to present, Maria Santos takes the podium, presenting case studies from the nationwide settlement. 6 months ago, these were just numbers in a database. Now their families back in their homes, communities restored, justice served. The screen behind her shows the results. Over 80,000 homes recovered, 15 banks reformed, 30 states adopting the Wheeler standards. But the numbers don't tell the whole story. During breaks, James meets with students individually. A young veteran studying law while working full-time. An elderly volunteer learning to help others navigate the system. Each one carrying forward the mission in their own way. Catherine Walsh arrives with news from Washington. The Veterans Banking Protection Act passed the Senate. Unanimous vote. They're calling it the Wheeler Law. James shakes his head modestly, but she continues. You've created something that will outlast all of us, a framework for justice that keeps evolving. Through the window, he watches new students arrive for the afternoon session. The program has spread to law schools nationwide, each center adapting the model to serve their local veterans. Sarah Collins leads the community outreach section, teaching advocates how to build support networks. Remember, she tells them, the algorithm targeted isolated veterans. Our strength is in unity. The afternoon sun fills the classroom as James returns to the podium. Behind him, photos show the journey, that first day in court, the Senate testimony, families returning home. But his favorite is the newest one, students from the program helping an elderly veteran save his farm in Kansas. Some of you, he addresses the class, will go on to fight in courtrooms. Others will work in compliance, ensuring banks follow the new laws. Many will help veterans directly, guiding them through challenges we haven't even seen yet. He pauses, remembering Margaret's words about making a difference. But all of you are part of something larger, a commitment that started with one case and grew into a movement. Brad raises his hand. Sir, other groups are asking about adapting the program. Senior citizens, immigrant communities. James nods. Justice doesn't limit itself, neither should we. As the day ends, students linger, sharing stories and strategies. James sees the future in their determination. Not just protecting veterans, but transforming how society treats its most vulnerable members. Tommy helps him gather his papers. Ready to head home, Grandpa? Almost. James looks around the classroom one last time. The walls are lined with case studies, procedure guides, victory stories, but more importantly, they're filled with hope. In his briefcase, next to Margaret's photo, lies a new document, the first draft of his book, Standing Ground, A Veteran's Guide to Justice. The lessons of one battle, becoming wisdom for the next generation. Outside, the evening sun catches the wheelchair ramp they've named after him. Another reminder that accessibility, like justice, must be built deliberately, thoughtfully, for everyone. James Wheeler, teacher, mentor, guardian of justice, watches his legacy unfold in the faces of those carrying the mission forward. Some victories echo not just across space, but through time, growing stronger with each new voice that joins the cause. The marble halls echo differently now. James wheels himself past the spot where young lawyers once mocked him, his new briefcase, a gift from the program's first graduating class, resting in his lap. Today's hearing is special, the final settlement report, but more importantly, the first case argued by the Veterans Advocacy Clinic. Through the courtroom doors he sees familiar faces. Judge Martinez on the bench, Catherine Walsh with the AG's office, Colonel Martinez mentoring the student advocates, even some of the bank's former lawyers now working for regulatory compliance. Tommy straightens his tie, preparing to present the case. Around him, other young advocates from the program arrange their materials with military precision. Ready, Grandpa? Tommy asks. James nods, remembering his own first argument in this very courtroom. You were born ready, son. The bailiff calls the court to order. Before the proceedings begin, Judge Martinez addresses the gallery. 1 year ago, she says, an old veteran stood in this courtroom, alone against a system designed to defeat him. Today, we see his legacy in action. James watches proudly as Tommy presents the clinic's first case. His grandson's voice carries the same quiet authority, the same unwavering commitment to justice that once turned one man's stand into a national movement. In the gallery, Mrs. Chen sits with other community members. Their neighborhood has transformed, not just houses saved, but a community awakened to its own strength. Brad and Melissa, now supervising attorneys for the clinic, guide their students with the wisdom of their journey. The same skills that once protected bank profits now serve to protect the vulnerable. As Tommy concludes his argument, James opens his briefcase. Inside, next to Margaret's photo, lies his Medal of Honor and his old JAG Corps badge. Beneath them, a newspaper clipping from last week. Wheeler Law expands to protect all vulnerable borrowers. The young advocates win their case naturally. They learned from the best, built on a foundation laid by one old soldier who refused to retreat. After the verdict, James rolls toward the courthouse steps where it all began. The afternoon sun bathes the scene in familiar golden light. "Mr. Wheeler," a young reporter calls out, "they say your case changed banking law forever. How does that feel?" James considers the question, looking at the next generation of advocates gathered around him. "It feels like a beginning, not an ending." Tommy helps him navigate the ramp they installed last month. Around them, veterans and lawyers mix easily, the divide between military and civilian worlds bridged by shared purpose. At the bottom of the steps, a group of law students waits to shake his hand. Each one carries the same fire he once saw in young officers' eyes, the determination to fight for what's right. "Sir," one asks, "any advice for our next case?" James smiles, hearing Margaret's words in his mind. "Remember that justice isn't just about winning. It's about lighting the way for others." The sun sets on the courthouse as James Wheeler, veteran, mentor, champion of justice, watches the next generation take up the cause. Some battles end with victory, but the best ones end with hope. In his briefcase, Margaret's photo seems to smile with pride. They'd built something lasting together, not just a legal victory, but a legacy of justice that would keep growing, keep fighting, keep protecting those who needed it most. The wheels of his chair catch the last rays of sunlight as he turns toward home. Behind him, young advocates discuss tomorrow's cases. Before him, the future unfolds with possibilities. Some old soldiers never lose their fight. They just find new ways to serve, new battles to win, new heroes to inspire. And in the quiet of a Boston evening, as justice and hope march forward together, that feels like the greatest victory of all.